There's rumors on the internet.
There are
Evan
not.
might have debunked it, but there's rumors going around.
Rumors.
People are, chit-chatting at the water cooler.
They are not.
And Uncle Scott finally got the story a couple years later. And I believe everything I read my phone. I open my phone and I read things. I immediately go, well, that's true because it's on the internet.
This is the equivalent of your aunt having a framed picture of Obi-Wan Kenobi over her fireplace as Jesus.
Yep.
Dearly beloved, welcome to the Unblessed Podcast, where we inquire and exposit the mysteries of that ancient text, that good book itself, the Holy Bible. We are not theologians nor historians. We are but armchair philosophers who spent years in seminary or on a church staff and have since departed to make our own way. We invite you now to read, think, and laugh with us as we dive deep into the denominational doctrines of the divine in the Unblessed Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unblessed Podcast. My name is Evan.
And I'm Scott.
And we are two ex-Nine Marks brothers. Scott, did you ever follow the Nine Marks system of church stuff?
System of church stuff.
I don't know what else to call it. It wasn't like a church planning thing. It was just like, it was like open resource stuff, which is kind of cool, but it was just, what it peddled was bad.
I love that description. I am aware of it. I can't remember if I really dove into the coursework.
Yeah.
But I do recall, because what was the one book, Nine Marks of a healthy church? He had a bunch of books, right?
Yeah,
it was a whole series of
like
nine
marks of a healthy church. 9 marks of being a disciple. 9 marks of marking things 9 times.
How to make 9 marks in your notebook with a pen.
9 marks of the Marx Brothers.
Yeah, I don't really recall. I do remember some of the dudes. Was it just Mark Dever?
Yeah.
Was he the only guy?
Yeah, Mark Dever was the big hitter.
Okay. I do remember him.
He ran in those same circles as Kevin DeYoung, John MacArthur, Mark Driscoll, CJ Mahaney.
CJ's all right. CJ has a pass.
Okay.
He seems nice, but maybe he should get canceled. I don't know.
That's how I feel about like half of these guys. I'm like, I've listened to like Tim Keller.
Yeah, I know. I saw he died.
Oh, did he really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, this week or over the weekend.
I know he had cancer or something like that.
Yeah, he died.
There was some stuff that he said that was like really solid and really good, and he always kind of like led his theology, which I think anybody should, with a level of grace and compassion and of a level of I don't know. Which is shocking considering the amount of stuff that he wrote that was very heavy theologically.
Yes.
But then I'm sitting there and I'm like, I read you like 10 years ago.
Yeah. I'm curious if I reread some of the books, how I'd feel.
Yeah.
But I don't ever remember him. He wasn't famous for like being like countercultural, like some other pastors, like just trying to be like, oh, you gotta, be a man, or you gotta, hate everything that's of this world. I felt like he was very much
like just like God
theology.
Feels nice.
Here, try this on. It's like a jacket.
Yeah,
it's called God. Try it on. It's a little big. But yeah, the 9 marks. I don't recall much of it, but I'm sure it was a hit at my church because we were a big 40 Days Rick Warren kind of church. That was
Rick Warren.
Yeah. So we had 31 more reasons.
Was Rick Warren one of those guys? I feel like he was an outsider because he advocates for women pastors.
I don't think he's part of that same crew of like the fundies.
No, I remember there was Piers Morgan did an interview with him, and walked away. And he was like, that was the most impressive interview I ever gave in my life.
Wow.
And it was because we should probably do a content warning at the beginning of all this, but Rick Warren's son shot himself and committed suicide.
Oh my gosh. Jeez.
And so they were just, Piers Morgan isn't a big anti-gun advocate. And so they had a really good conversation about like mental health and everything like that.
I think I remember that.
Yeah. And Piers Morgan was like, hands down, best conversation I've ever had.
Better than beans and toast, might I say.
Better than the Queen.
Pleasure to have you.
Pleasure.
Put her there. Put a paw in there.
That's my Piers Morgan impression.
Yeah, Rick Warren was, for those who don't know, his big selling point was a book called 40 Days of Purpose, and he was famous for wearing like a Hawaiian shirt to church. And it was like, oh, I'm the casual pastor. I'm the cool dad, you know?
Yeah,
like, that was
he
his
really
shtick.
was a dad. That was his shtick,
was
being a dad. And he was being interviewed recently about the sex scandal stuff at the SBC. And they were like, so what'd you think?
Whoa.
And he was like, I don't think they went far enough. He was like, it's our job.
Damn, good on you, Rick.
I know, Rick.
Although, is he SBC? It's easy for him to say if he's outside of SBC.
I don't know if he's SBC. I mean, he's SBC adjacent, and he's like, enough SBC people look to Rick Warren for guidance, you know?
True.
So I feel like he exists in that same realm that Russell Moore does, where it's like no longer SBC, but people still carry.
Russell Moore's not SBC anymore either?
He left after Trump.
Damn, good on him. I always had respect for that guy. He seemed like he had
Russell Moore left after Trump got elected, and
dang,
because he was with his organization, the ERLC or whatever, he was trying to like push a bunch of anti-Trump stuff, and they were like, "No, we don't want you to." And he was like, "All right, well, these are my fingers," and he left, and made his church non-SBC. Or something or other. I don't know how he did it. Or whatever. It's probably some church that paid off its property years ago, you know.
Yeah. I remember this now. I do recall something about
because he did like a big open letter.
Yes. Yeah, I do remember this now. Yeah, I remember meeting that guy a couple times. I used to go down to Southern Seminary like a couple times a year, and I would just fangirl over Albert Mohler and Russell Moore all the time. Oh my gosh. People would stroke it to Albert Mohler down there. They love that guy. And I don't really care about him personally. I never really cared about him that much. Russell Moore, though, I thought he had an interesting perspective for how fundamentalist of an organization he was co-running.
Yeah.
He had a pretty good head and shoulders, but
considering how conservative he was, he put out an article that was why Christians shouldn't own guns.
Damn, Russell.
And I think Russell's one of those guys that just takes a lot of things to the core. And you're like, hey, if you're really a Christian, you should take this seriously. And he's like, yes, I do. And he goes like that much further with it. But that's kind of all these guys and that's the whole bag about all these guys is you run into, you've got your Mark Driscolls who are your toxic, like, be a man type pastors. You have your Rick Warren, who's a dad. And it's just,
he's just like Pixar land, like on a scooter somewhere.
Yeah. He's just, if Jimmy Buffett was a pastor.
Yes.
And then you have like Russell Moore, who you feel like you can have you're going to disagree with a lot of his politics, but you do feel like you can have a beer with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Who is he in the Avengers?
Russell Moore?
Yeah.
Oh, Hawkeye. Like, I do not. I think you could do without him.
Who is Rick Warren then in the Avengers?
Thor. 100%.
Perfect. And who is Mark Driscoll?
Oh, God.
He could be evil.
I'm trying to think of the most useless.
Or just the one that sucks the most.
I already used up Hawkeye.
I already used Hawkeye.
That Quicksilver guy who like spends 30 minutes in a movie and then just gets shot.
Fair. Well, speaking of animated superheroes and the whatnot with superpowers, super people, superpowers, and super people.
Speaking
Captain Falcon.
God.
I did it. I did it.
Scott, you never cease to amaze me.
There's rumors on the internet.
There are
Evan
not.
might have debunked it, but there's rumors going around.
Rumors.
People are, chit-chatting at the water cooler.
They are not.
And Uncle Scott finally got the story a couple years later. And I believe everything I read on my phone. I open my phone and I read things. I immediately go, well, that's true because it's on the internet.
This is the equivalent of your aunt having a framed picture of Obi-Wan Kenobi over her fireplace as Jesus.
Yep.
That's what's going on. So
it's the exact same thing. So I found an article that says the Nintendo developers confirm that Captain Falcon's powers come from his strong faith in Jesus Christ.
They do not. But I'll play along.
No, I just give it to me straight.
Okay. They didn't. There you go. So Super Smash Bros. Creator Masahiro Sakurai shocked the gaming community. This is what the article says. It's from harddrive.net.
It's real. Yep.
It's not.
100%.
Shocked the gaming community today by finally announcing that fan favorite character Captain Falcon gets his powers from his strong faith in Jesus Christ. People have been asking and finally decided to deliver, Sakurai explained in a thread on Twitter. I always knew he worshipped our eternal savior, and the only true explanation for a Falcon kick of that power is his inspiration from his divine sacrifice. In fact, the truth was always available to those who look closely. Take Captain Falcon's signature move, for example. Falcon Punch, FP. Clearly, this is an allusion to First Psalms.
Clearly.
Whenever I see FP.
Obviously, that means first. What is First Psalms even reference?
It's like the shortest psalm. It's
Just
the most
the first
forgettable
Psalms.
one, too. Like, oh, man. That's like what am I supposed to make of, like, soccer clubs that are like FC? Am I supposed to be like First Corinthians?
Yes.
Like, can abbreviations just mean anything now?
To numerology and people looking for Christ and
God,
everything,
don't
yes.
even get me started on numerology. It's such bullshit. Super Smash Bros. Melee Pro and Captain Falcon main Wizrobe shared his opinion on the news. It's always a great thing to know that after I die in a tournament, my character will be seated at the right hand of the Father, even if it's digital. Wizrobe said. It makes me extra joy in using Captain Falcon to kill Jigglypuff, a heinous creation I could only imagine to be a servant of Satan.
This is the best interview.
Oh my God. Deacon Robert Ohlmeyer of St. Gabriel of the Archangel Church also weighed in on what this news means for Catholicism. We're always welcoming more people to worship at the feet of Christ, Ohlmeyer said. I just wish Sakurai could have anointed a cooler fighter. Catholic or not, I'm not changing my main from Samus. I'm still reeling from the time I found out she's a girl.
I love the St. Gabriel Archangel Church says, I'm not changing my main from Samus.
Not changing my main. Despite universal praise for the announcement from Super Smash Bros. Fans, creator of Captain Falcon and the F-Zero series, Takaya Imumar, I'm destroying these names. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, everyone.
Was reportedly disappointed upon hearing the news. He said, "What?" And Imumar said, "What the fuck?" He said, "What?" At press time, when asked what was next for the franchise, Sakurai revealed that a future Nintendo Direct will feature a live baptism of the Ice Climbers, something he wanted to do in the Wii U 3Ds era, but did not have the technology capable to complete.
I want to see the live baptism of the Ice Climbers bad.
Please.
I mean, they float to the top.
How do you do a live baptism of animated characters?
Great question. We're going to have to beg Nintendo for this.
Are you
next game.
live streaming someone drawing them getting baptized.
Does God save video game characters? Isn't there a
What if
song,
cartoons
What if God saved
got
cartoons?
saved? They
There we go.
start singing praise in a whole new way.
Do you think cartoons get saved, Evan?
No, they go straight to hell.
They go to hell? They have souls?
They do have souls. Scooby-Doo has a soul. When he dies, he goes to hell.
That's what my mom said. She said anything drawn with a face has a soul,
Yep.
and it will go to hell unless it's a human being.
Because the face is representation of a soul. And so if you draw something that has a face, beware, kids. If you're drawing stick figures with smiley faces, a stick figure with just a blank head is okay.
Yeah.
As soon as you draw a face on it, and then it goes in the trash, and then it goes to the dump, then it gets burned up, it's
Goes
dead.
to hell. Unless you shared the gospel with it.
It goes to double hell if it gets recycled.
That's right.
Yeah.
No chances.
So
choose wisely. You put smiley faces on.
And the amount of people you send to hell determines whether or not you go to hell.
Wait, is there a ratio or is this just a threshold of a number?
I think it's the threshold of a number. It's just like
What's the number?
I think like 2.
2. So if you're responsible for sending 2 people to hell, I'm pretty sure I've done like 2 of my own grandparents. Drawn figures. Oh my, it's countless.
Yep. So sorry.
Who's your main in Super Smash?
Captain Falcon from now on.
Yeah, me too. I'm taking the pledge.
I know. No, Samus is my main.
Really?
Yeah, I default to Samus. I like the charge up ability.
Nice.
It always bones me in the end, but
If it's N64, I'm choosing Yoshi. But
wow.
any other one, it's Link.
Oh, you're a Link kid. Gross.
I'm a Link guy.
Oh, you're one of those. I couldn't
I know.
stand. I hated Link.
It fits. I'm just used to it. All right. What are we talking about today? What's our main topic?
Nothing. We're going home. No,
I think we're
today
talking about Steve Jobs, right?
we were talking about Job, the Book of Job.
Book of Job. We should
This
just say it like Job the whole time in case anyone
man.
skips over this part.
This reminds me of that episode of Arrested Development where Job feels like he's getting like shafted, and he's like, "I feel like that guy in the Bible that everything bad happens to." It's like Job, and he's like, "What?"
That was a really good Will Arnett impression.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully it comes through audio-wise pretty good.
I think so.
Yeah, so we're talking about Job. The Book of Job is honestly a really fascinating book. You zoom out, it's really like mythologically a really cool book where it stands in Jewish tradition is interesting because this is not the only story of Job that exists. There are other stories of Job. There's one story where Job's family doesn't die. The caricature of Job in Jewish tradition is that he's somebody that suffered a lot and then endured.
Yeah.
That's the idea. This one got picked up, and this was a story. This one got picked up and was told, and was written during a time, if I'm not mistaken, where the Israelites just did not have a homeland. It was passed down during that time. So that's also worth considering. It's also the first book of the Bible that is written intentionally, written in the setting of another book, almost. It's kind of what's going on.
It's also the oldest book we have historically, right?
Yeah.
As far as manuscripts or as far as the tradition. I can't recall, but I'm pretty sure. Go ahead and fact check me, listeners. But I know that it's a very old book because I know the Bible, as much as we like to think it was just kind of handed down in order, it's really just compiled from a number of sources. And Job, I can't recall the date when it was first written down or the first copies that were allowed in, but you're right. It is in a period where, Israel is without a home or without their own land. And the setting is just totally outside of the normal Bible. It feels weird. Like if you read the Bible cover to cover, Job just sticks out like a sore thumb, not even about a quarter of the way through. You're like, what is this book? Are you looking up the date of when it was? I
was on the date of when it was
together?
written. So the character Job appears in the 6th century BCE book of Ezekiel as an exemplary righteous man of antiquity. The author of the book of Job has apparently chosen this legendary hero for his parable. Scholars generally agree that it was written between the 7th and 4th centuries, the 6th century being the most likely.
That's what I think mine says, about 530 or 580. So it sounds right.
Job is a fascinating book, and we can go ahead and dive into it.
It'll speak for itself.
There was a man in the country of Uz named Job. He was a man of perfect integrity who feared God and turned away from evil. Pause. So this takes place as a contemporary to Abraham.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And the land of Uz is nowhere near where Abraham's route would have been. So how did Job fear God?
This is the same question I have for Melchizedek in, is it Genesis?
Yeah.
Because same thing. He's also contemporary. And they just find him on the road while they're traveling. And he's like, oh, I believe in God. And they're like, how? We just saw him for the first time back that way. What are you saying? Yeah, those are the best questions to ask, because we tend to just think that everybody in the Bible is just on the same page all the time. But you never think about, how did this person get the message of, the gospel, or at least the commandments to them.
And we have to also remember that like evangelism was not a strong motive in the Old Testament. It's only Jonah.
Yeah.
That really,
and even most of the time it's like a warning. It's not even like I think a lot of times it's been softened up to like, we think about like modern mission trips of like, go and do like a VBS and, have a Bible story and make a snacks for people.
God was like mad and was going to destroy him. And he was like, all right, go and tell him.
Yeah. The prophets were like the last stop of like, hey, God's going to fuck your city up. I'm going to send somebody to be merciful. So yeah, it was cutthroat, and people, so it's fascinating, just even verse 1, because how is he blameless and upright if he didn't even know the commandments at that time? Like, was he following the Sabbath? Did he have idols? Because everybody had idols back then that's how you made it rain.
Yeah. We'll get into this a little bit later. How does he know how to make a sacrifice?
Yeah. All these things.
Yep. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. His estate included 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large number of servants. Job was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons...
Sounds like Job wrote this.
Oh. My name's Job, and I'm
the best.
He was really good looking and smart, and everyone loved him. His sons used to take turns having banquets at their homes. They would send an invitation to their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Whenever a round of banqueting was over, Job would send for his children and purify them, rising early in the morning to offer burnt offerings for all of them. For Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned, having cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular practice.
So one thing I kind of learned, and maybe everybody knows this, but I was reading a book about some of how did people kind of come across the Bible and spirituality and all these things, like sort of kind of the historical perspective. And one of the most, at least one of the explanations for sacrifices is people thought smoke was just food for the gods. So they thought like the particles would vanish, because they didn't know what fire was really, what was happening. They didn't understand like what this reaction was. They just thought, I set on fire and it disappears into the sky. So this must be food for whatever god's up there. So
heaven's just Cheech and Chong's house.
Absolutely. It's just smoke 24/7. But it makes sense why, because people, people's version of God is just bigger versions of themselves most times. It's their perfect version of themselves. So that's why people would sacrifice things they liked in hopes of what the gods would like. It's like, oh, this is my favorite, I'm going to take the best of my grain here. I'm going to take my favorite kid. But it's interesting. He was just burning.
I'm gluten free.
Yeah, I don't like any of that. I don't like burnt kids.
I like burnt kids. No, thank you.
So yeah, he's smoking it up to God the whole time. So God has a full belly. So
one day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord asked Satan, "Where have you come from?" "From murmuring the earth," Satan answered him, "and walking around on it." I want to pause here. So it's important to note that God and Satan in Job act uncharacteristically.
Yes.
Entirely. God would know where Satan was coming from. Satan also just doesn't... What he does to Job is really evil. But Satan is more of a deceiver in the rest of the Bible. He doesn't have that strong of a power.
He's very much a trickster in this account. Like he's just trying to he's calling God's bluff, kind of.
It's more in the, I think, traditional Jewish sense of Satan, in that he's an adversary. He's just advocating against him. He's your he's the accuser is more of what he is.
Yes. My study Bible, the Hebrew noun for this individual means the accuser or the adversary.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil."
They're just at a four-wheel drive and air conditioning.
They're just at a barbecue talking about people on earth. Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you placed a hedge around him, his household, and everything he owns? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he owns, and he will surely curse you to your face." Very well, the Lord told Satan, "Everything he owns is in your power. However, you must not lay a hand on Job himself." So Satan left the Lord's presence. It's also important to note that how God uncharacteristically acts in the rest of the book of Job. Everywhere else in the Bible, it's pretty common for Israel to turn their back on God, and God sends in a savior. God reaches down. God chases after his people. God does not do that with Job at all.
No, he just lets him. He wants to see what happens. It's a social experiment.
Yeah, it's they're, for lack of a better word, gambling on his life.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to just back up to 7, though. I love that he asked Satan what he was doing, and he just said, mine just says, from going to and fro on earth. He's just dilly-dallying on earth, just walking around. I love that God has no idea where the adversary is.
Where'd you come from?
I can see everything in all of history, but you spooked me. You're crafty.
Gotta be honest, I didn't expect you to show up here.
Yeah.
One day when this part is hilarious to me. One day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and reported, while the oxen were plowing and the donkeys grazing nearby, the Sabaeans swooped down and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. He was still speaking when another messenger came and reported, a lightning storm struck from heaven. It burned up the sheep and the servants and devoured them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. That messenger was still speaking when yet another came and reported, "The Chaldeans formed 3 bands, made a raid on the camels, and took them away. They struck down the servants with a sword, and I have alone escaped to tell you." He was still speaking when another messenger came and reported, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. Suddenly a powerful wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on the young people so that they died, and I alone have escaped to tell you."
There's so much going on.
Oh
right
my
there.
God. Job is just getting like bombarded with information all at the same time. It's just like, hey, your way of living is gone. Hey, your children are gone. Hey.
It's chaos. There's 4 people that come up and are talking all at the same time and screaming at Job that his life is in shambles. Like, it's horrible.
Oh, man.
Just horrible.
Then Job stood up, tore his robe, and shaved his head. He fell to the ground and worshipped, saying, "Naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this life. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Praise the name of Yahweh." Throughout all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything.
Okay. I'm going to be that guy. But if the tables were turned, like if I went to my wife, if my neighbor, Brett, was like, "I don't think your wife loves you that much. What if you burnt your house down, set her car on fire, you died. Let's see if your wife still loves you. Let's just do a bunch of mean things to your wife and see if she still loves you at the end of the day." I'd be like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Like, and I would be responsible if I started the wager and these bad things happen because I started them. I should be at blame. Why is God not to blame in the situation?
Absolutely.
It's interesting to think about that, but
he gives Satan does not have the power to actually do this to Job. God gives Satan the power.
Yes.
And then later, Satan says, "Look, you haven't affected him personally. That's why he's not blaspheming you." And God says, "All right, you just can't kill him."
Yeah. I mean, later in the verses, he gives him these like skin boils and he wants to just absolutely die. He wishes he was never born. All these horrible things happen to this dude.
Oh,
all for what?
I want to fast forward because it says Job never sinned or blamed God for any of this. Job 30, verse 20. "I cry out to you, capital U, for help, but you do not answer me. When I stand up, you merely look at me. You have turned against me with cruelty. You harass me with your strong hand. You lift me up on the wind and make me ride it. You scatter me in the storm. Yes, I know that you will lead me to death, the place anointed for all who live."
Dang.
And then
sounds like he's blaming God.
Then Job starts making a case for himself. He's just like, "Have I not wept for those who have fallen on hard times? Has my soul not grieved for the needy? But when I hoped for good, evil came. When I looked for light, darkness came."
Yikes. Yeah,
I think Job too often gets oversimplified, like a lot of books in the Bible.
Absolutely.
Gets oversimplified as he never cursed God, which we obviously see that's not true. And he just kept his head up, and we obviously see that that's not true. Job, we keep going back to this every time we tell one of these stories. Let the story be the story.
Yeah.
The story.
We're trying to apply fundamentalist perspectives on this and make it. I think the thing that I am bamboozled by is that I grew up, we treated this as history. Like this was a historical, like the whole Bible it's a historical account.
How would this be a historical account? Like I get like Kings, Chronicles, all of that, but like who would give a shit to write this story?
But it's a slippery slope because if there's just a story of God and it's just all allegory, then that means the rest of the Bible could all just be allegory at some case. So it's
gee.
Darn. How did you grow up with this? Like, was it taught to you as history?
I don't think anybody ever explicitly explained it as history, but I think it was kind of explained in that light. And the problem with treating Job as a historically accurate account is you have to accept some of the pitfalls of the story if you believe Job is a real person. If you believe that Job is a real person, then you also believe that he was able to understand fully God at the level that Abraham did without ever needing any sort of evangelism.
Yeah, the only explanation I can see it, they said the location of this land, talking about Uz or Uz, the location of this land to the east is unknown. So I gotta hold up my Bible so I can read it. But it may be related to Aram in the north, where Abraham's nephew and family lived, or to a descendant of Seir who lived alongside the sons of Esau. Basically, it's saying, well, he could have been near Esau and Abraham, possibly, but that's still a stretch. I mean, we're still that is a shot in the dark saying that he and to think that he had a perfect picture of the commandments and the character of God. Like, no. See, and that's the problem is, like you were saying, is people read into Job like he's a modern day Bible reader and Bible believer when he's going off of just fumes. Quite literally fumes. He's just burning animals all day. And
this is another thing worth noting. Job is a contemporary of Abraham at this time.
Yeah.
Or he's supposed to be. And God considers in this book Job to be a man of perfect integrity and the most righteous in all the land.
Yeah. How?
Yeah.
How did he know? It was the same thing with Melchizedek. Is like they said he was the king of righteousness. And some people say it's an illusion or that it was actually Jesus on the road, but that's not the way we interpret it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Was Job Jesus and all this?
Yeah. Another thing that I like to point out about Job is, and I really challenge people if they're listening to prove me wrong on this, is so Job has a lot of wealth and he gets all that stripped away. Yeah. God, one, never tells him why he does it.
Yeah.
He never does. He just kind of tells Job to quit your bitching at the end. But then the whole thing is God rewards Job tenfold.
Yeah. But that's not the same thing. Like, if someone killed my family and then gave me 10 more of my of different people, that's not the same.
It's not the same. And the argument against that is, well, it's a Jewish literary tradition. To which I respond, I see one book where that pops up, and that's not enough for a literary tradition.
Yeah.
If you can find other examples of Jewish literary history where this is a common thing, that by all means. But once is not enough for me to believe.
Or someone gets something taken away and it comes back tenfold, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, I have no idea in other spots. This whole book, I mean, we won't read it in its entirety, but there's a lot of imagery and like literary devices that have been passed down for years. You know, like these bigger themes of like good versus evil and a pure heart choosing the right path. You know, like these very like time-tested tales. You know, it's like we have these today. Like that's why we have superhero movies, and certain stories resonate with humans, and that's why they're famous. And this is one of them. But this archetype. You know? This
one is just sometimes life sucks, and you don't know why.
Yeah, and honestly, like it is a. I will say, to its credit, I think why it's a famous book is because it's one of the first attempts at an explanation of why bad things happen to good people. Because I don't think there was really another book or tradition in the past that was saying because usually you would go, oh, if something bad happened to you, you probably sinned, or you did something, or your dad did something wrong. That's why you have this disease. But this is the first one where people's minds were starting to go with this idea of God, going, wait, but I do believe in God, but then my crops all, they all died this season. What happened? I was doing the right thing.
Well, and you think about how much the people of Israel and the Jewish people have gone through up until this point.
Yes.
At the point of this story circulating.
Yes.
And, God gave his people a chosen land. All of a sudden, they don't have it anymore. They no longer have their land. And so they're kind of sitting there like, well, what the hell? Like, why?
Yeah.
Well, I thought we were God's chosen people. And, this story starts to gain prominence because it's like, here's another thing to kind of point out. If you're reading Job like this, if you're reading Job from the point of letting the story be the story, the first chapter, honest to God, all it does is set up like the first half is like what might have happened. And the second half is what actually happened.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, if we're going to say that God caused any of this, let's just say God, and it's kind of like an old man walks into a bar. It's setting up and being like, okay, so God and Satan were talking, and they decide that the most righteous man in the world, they're going to give him hell. They're going to see what he does with it. And it's just it's just a sad story of something bad happening to a person who shouldn't have had it happen to them. But
yeah, you made a good point. It's the rest of the story is diving deeper into like his
depression
contemporaries, his friends, like they try to push him to curse God and to give up and all this stuff. So
his wife tells him to curse God. His friends are like, hey, aren't you bad? Like, and he's like, no, I'm not. And they're like, yeah, but you probably cheated on your wife, or you may have stole something. Hey, maybe just fess up. And he's like, I didn't.
I will give back to that same point of kind of giving this book credit is at this time, people did think if you were doing everything right as far as spiritually, then you'd have good fortune.
Yeah.
But it makes sense why people are telling him to stop and curse God, because they're like, you're worshiping a bad dude. Like every time you're doing stuff, he's just making it worse for you. Why don't you worship somebody else? Like, and I think that's why I wish it was taught in a little bit more of a, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Not just like a little bit looser understanding of what this book is about. Because the way I was taught was like, well, the bad people wanted him to curse God, but Job had patience, the patience of Job, and he had all the faith in the world. So even though all his friends, because it's kind of about like anti-bullying, like, oh, don't let the bullies dictate, your faithfulness. You got to just power through.
Yeah.
But I think about his friends were like, everything is going to shit. Your life is in shambles. Maybe you should rethink what you're doing. And he's like, no, I got this. And they're like, all right, well, screw you.
Yeah. Well,
but it humanizes it.
Yeah. The first few chapters, he stays strong a little bit. But then as we heard in 30, that's where he kind of like lets loose. And he's like, I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm a good person. No one comes across me and is in need. And he's just like, but here I am suffering this entire time. He's like, I don't know why. God's going to lead me to my death. That's all I know. And I'm pretty pissed about it.
Pour one out for Job.
I don't know.
I tell you what, he had it rough.
Oh, yeah. No, but don't worry. He gets a replacement family.
I remember even as a kid, I was like, when they would tell that story, I'd be like, but the first chapter says his whole family died. Like, so do they resurrect him, or like, does he just get new doppelgangers where the exact same?
Oh, I forgot about these.
Oh, they're the seller. This is 1905.
Oh, I have hotter children.
Oh my gosh. What are some of your kind of final thoughts on Job? I know we might have to do a part 2 on this book.
For sure. My just short and sweet, simple thought is I think Job is actually a satire. I've mentioned that before to you. I think its whole point is that life sucks and you don't get to know why.
Yeah.
And it's using it's kind of, I think it kind of sets the frame of like people who are wanting to know why God would do something to them. And he's kind of like, do you really want to know why? The whole author is just like, this is what could be happening. You know, we aren't to say
maybe God made a bet.
Yeah, maybe God made a bet. How about that? That seems like something that could have happened. And I think where it really becomes a satire for me is when Job gets his new family at the end of it.
Yeah.
Because anybody who's ever lost anyone would tell you that there's nothing there's nothing in the world that could replace that. And so it does leave a bit of a sour taste in your mouth at the end of it, and it's supposed to. I think it's supposed to. I think it's supposed to leave that sour taste, and I think it's supposed to say life's shit and you don't know why. And you have to keep going.
I don't think it really frames God as the most righteous, wise God out there in this book. Yeah. He feels like a god of the Greek mythology to me. Yeah. To be honest, he feels like kind of scattered in his approach. He feels a little jealous, a little competitive, all these things that Greek gods had.
And truthfully, I don't think this book's about God. I think this is more just about the human experience, and that's why I like Job more and more. The more times I dive into it, the more I like it, because it's more about how somebody experiences the world around them as a result of God's actions and Satan's actions than it is necessarily about like, oh, well, God told me to burn my son, better go do it.
Yikes.
This is more of Job's perspective of like, holy shit, I don't know why everything's falling apart around me. I have no idea. And then God speaks to him, doesn't tell him, just tells him to like kind of buck up, which is kind of the attitude people in Israel would have at the moment. And I think like that's why this story is so powerful, because they were promised a land that they were not able to hold on to.
Yeah.
That kept getting taken away from them. And so, and like, there's no mistake that that there's invasions mentioned in the first chapter of this book.
From all four guys at the same time.
Oh my God. And so that's just, I think the ending is supposed to leave a bitter taste in your mouth.
That's interesting.
So,
yeah.
What about you?
It always felt out of place. Even when I was in the height of my Bible reading, I just remember the beginning of this book felt so strange. Like, why would God make a deal? It feels like a playful deal. I think that's what was always so off-putting to me, was I was always taught about how scary and horrifying hell was as a kid, that Satan was always there to trick you and deceive you, and like he would torture you once you got to hell, and God, is going to kill Satan at the end of days, and it's going to be a huge battle. So I had this framework that Satan was this mastermind of spiritual being that was out to get me. I mean, I truly believed in the boogeyman for years. That was Satan. Like, I thought he would listen to me. So to have this like playful exchange between God and Satan feels so off-putting to me now.
Yeah, it's like, kill him now.
Yeah. It's like, just kill him. He's right there. You don't even know where he's at. So this story sticks out like a sore thumb, but I think revisiting, and this book I've been reading about it, I feel a bit more gracious towards some of these Old Testament books, because I used to just be like, well, they didn't know what they were doing, and why is this book significant? But I do think now I understand why it's significant, as we were talking, because it gave people that glimmer of an explanation that, you know what, maybe I'm not a bad person. It's just that God is testing my patience and my faith. Yeah. So it's kind of one of the first traditions in human history of you know what? Sometimes bad stuff happens to good people. And
Yeah.
to that, I give it credit because I will say it nudged humanity in the right direction.
Yeah.
So,
And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like it's a shockingly early book
yeah.
to be giving an answer of you don't get an answer.
I'm curious if this book was actually written later, how it would have changed. Like if it, you know, if they were pulling from the authors of Genesis, and Exodus, and Leviticus and all that, and they were inspired more by that. I'm curious how this book would change if they would make God a little bit more, you know, a little more righteous or a little bit more powerful. I'm curious because, like we've been saying, it's so early, and he's a contemporary of Abraham. He's just sort of this guy in the clouds that likes burnt food.
He likes his pizza how he likes his nerds. Burnt.
That's all I got.
Yeah. No, I and my last little thing here that I'll say is that if you are seriously reading the Bible and if you are looking through it, like seriously consider how you need to read Job to make it make sense. Because you either have to read it like Joe's a real person or that Joe's a fictional person.
Yes.
And then you also have to come to terms with the fact that the God of Job and the Satan of Job do not act like God and Satan in any other text in the entire Bible.
Yeah. This is certainly one of those slippery slopes of you have to pick one side or the other. Is Job historical and real? And is this all in line? Or is this just an oral tradition or whatever that was kind of placed into this canon? So interesting stuff. Yeah. Evan, what have you been digging? What's been cooking over household of Johnson?
We watched this fascinating movie this last weekend. It's called The Lost King. And it is about this amateur historian who dug up and was able to find and piece together Richard III's body and where it was buried. And they only found Richard III's body in like 2012.
Oh.
They didn't know where, like, he was defeated. And so for a long time, it was just thought that he was just thrown over into a river. And then she was like, okay, that doesn't make any sense because of these things. And, you know, Shakespeare talked about Richard III having a hunchback because Shakespeare was writing to the dynasty that killed Richard III. And in reality, when they discovered his skeleton, they diagnosed it with scoliosis of the spine.
Oh.
And so it was fascinating to... It's a really good movie. It's called The Lost King, and it's about this woman who worked in like a marketing firm and then was just
she found his body in like the closet in the back of the room. They're like, hey, there's a dead guy back here.
She found his body in a car park in a social services building underneath a marking R for reserved.
It was just there?
I mean,
just
it was
chilling?
It was under the... It was
He's
underground.
Just, like, in the parking lot.
Help!
He's been here for 600 years.
Anybody? No, like they didn't have to dig far, but they did like find him. And initially they just found his legs, and then dug him out further, and they
I hope he's alive.
Yeah. And they found his full body. They found like the blow to the head, the twisted spine, and they did DNA tests because a guy around that time had done DNA tests for Richard III's descendants, and was like, there's a cabinet maker in Canada that has more claim to the throne than Queen Elizabeth. And so they got him involved, and he was like, it's Richard.
Interesting.
So fascinating.
The Lost King.
The Lost King. Highly recommend it. It's not long. Really good movie. It's got Mark Addy, who's one of the 7 British actors that appears in every British film.
I have no idea who that is.
That's the thing, is you would know him if you saw him. He's one of those,
I probably would.
He's
I'd
one
probably
of those,
go, another guy.
He's one of those 7 British actors.
They all all the British people look the same to me. I can't pick them out.
That's also true. What about you, Scott? What's going over in the Moran house?
Oh, I read this book over. I was on vacation last week, so be jealous. That's right.
All right.
I read this book called God, the Bible, and Human Consciousness by Nancy Clasby. It's very good. It just walks through from Genesis through the major players of the Old Testament and then the New Testament and then like the Apocalypse and like, and it takes a look at it from like a historical perspective, but mainly how did human thought and humans start, why do we like these stories? Why did these resonate? So it kind of plays on that theme the whole way through of like, why did we have a Genesis? What were people trying to communicate through this? So if you're interested in it's an overview of the Bible from a more historical and I guess you could say psychological perspective, this is the book. It's pretty good. So books. I've read 2 books this year. I'm doing great. I'm trying.
You're halfway through.
So that's all I got.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody. You can catch us on Instagram at UnblessedPod. You can catch us on TikTok at UnblessedPod. You can catch us on YouTube at UnblessedPod. You can catch us here at the Unblessed Podcast. You can also email us at unblessedpod@gmail.com. Happy to receive any emails from you. We want to hear your thoughts, and we want to hear what you want us to hear us talk about. If there's anything in the Christian news that you think is worth spouting about, we'd love to hear it. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And my name is Evan.
And I'm Scott.
And don't forget to close your Bible.